we go. Well, hey guys, welcome back. This is part 2 of a mini series. We're back again today with Dr. Pete Sulack, one of the nation's leading experts in stress. And Dr. Pete, we're so blessed to have you back with us again. Thank you so much.
Hey, Doc, it's an honor to be with you, always.
Listen, we just want to kind of refresh the people that are joining. Perhaps they haven't had a chance to see show 1 yet, where we were talking about how important stress is. And not only we can't eliminate stress in our life, but we can certainly take specific steps to build a bigger resilience to that stress and a stronger resilience. So if you would, why don't you just recap for us about stress and how stress affects our life, if you don't mind?
Absolutely. Stress is an internal response that our body has to this external world. And stress is not just drama. We mentioned last time that I speak around the world a lot about the topic of stress, and most people assume it's drama. Like when the elections occurred, everyone started calling because they want to know how to deal with the stress of our new president. But it's more than just, hey, are things going well for me today? It's physical, chemical, emotional, even spiritual stress. And that affects us every day of our life. And so health is really based on my body's ability to deal with the environment effectively, respond eternally, and then adapt and recover. And when the body loses the ability to really adapt and recover to circumstances of life and the stressors of life, that's where chronic illness and everything begins to develop, really survive and thrive as well.
Yeah, it's interesting how you say that. And we live in a world where not only medical physicians or medicine, but I've seen it with allopathic physicians. They'll start chasing all those symptoms. And they're really, I think you stated quite well, they're looking for the wrong culprit.
Yeah,
right?
They are. And if you look at the wrong culprit in any area of your life, you lose. It's like we go to war and we keep getting destroyed by the enemy and we just can't figure it out. But the whole time, unbeknownst to us, there's a spy in our camp. They call it a mole. And we know the spy's name. We're with him every day of our life. We just never knew he was a spy. And unless we identify the true culprit when it comes to sickness and disease and health, we'll never get on the road to health. And stress is really that spy in the enemy's camp. We know his name. We're with him every day of our life. In fact, I saw a recent study that said we have more stress in 1 month today than a generation ago had in their entire lifetime, only one generation ago. So we're very familiar with the aspects of stress, but we've never identified it as the culprit. We just kind of glossed over it and said, yeah, I have stress, not realizing that the body's ability to adapt and recover, or the inability to recover to the stressors of life, that is the beginning of disease. And unless we look at health from the right perspective, you will lose.
Absolutely. It's interesting. You mentioned right at the beginning of the talk here that we're a lot of people think stress is that emotional reaction they have, but stress occurs in 3 forms, of course, the physical and chemical and emotional stress. So talk to me, if you will, what type of techniques in your offices at Exodus Chiropractic, what techniques do you use in evaluating physical stress in a person's life?
Well, I think one of the biggest, the easiest ways to determine physical stress is posture, range of motion. But one of the easiest ways is x-rays. When I look at a person's x-rays, especially even on plain film, and we can assess disc degeneration and arthritis. We're led to believe, Dr. John, that disc degeneration and arthritis is because you're older or it runs in your family. But the reality is, disc degeneration and arthritis is that your body's been stuck in a stress response for nearly 30 years and is taking on the effects of that chronic stress. And so when I see disc degeneration or arthritis, I really see a person that's been susceptible to life, for about 30 years. And so what we want to do, like we said before, we want to create resiliency to the stressors of life. And one of the greatest ways to do that is to assess the spine, assess disc degeneration or arthritis, assess movement of the spine so that we can create resiliency once again and allow the body to deal with the stressors of life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very good point. And when you're talking about degeneration actually occurring to the spine, a person at home can assess their family. They can look for, that abnormal posture. Is that head in a forward tilt? Does it set in front of their shoulders, or is maybe one shoulder higher than the other? That's a very good way for, a parent to check a child, or even for couples to check one another. Am I dealing with a physical stress or trauma? And if you think about it, in our society right now, with all the tablets and iPhones and iPads, if you look at some of the research out there, how many hours people are spending on these devices in that forward flexed position, this problem is becoming epidemic in nature, for sure.
Absolutely. You know, the outer layer of your spinal cord is the meningeal layer, and that meningeal layer is one of the greatest ways that the body facilitates the stress response in the body. And under stress, that jaw kind of stretches and facilitates that fight or flight response. And then when the stress goes away, that jaw relaxes, which allows the body to restore some of the homeostasis. Well, what's interesting is that the vertebrae of your spine and the joints of your spine are synovial joints, which simply means they're fluid-filled joints. And science proves that every fluid-filled or synovial joint has to have full range of motion. And if it ever loses full range of motion, it instantly begins to send what's called nociceptors to the brain to tell the brain, hey, that joint is under stress. Similar synovial joints are your shoulder joints, elbow joints, knee joints. Now, think about this. If you went and had shoulder surgery and you went to your orthopedic afterwards, and what do they want to do? They want to get rid of the pain. They want to get rid of the inflammation. But the number one thing they have to do is restore that range of motion. Why? Because if they don't, they will not shut down that stress response. When it comes to joints of your spine, when a person gets under chronic stress, the spinal cord will stretch, keeping their body in a stress response, causing the vertebrae, those synovial joints, to lose their proper motion, which literally triggers the brain over and over again that the body's in a stress response. That's where disc degeneration arthritis comes from. It's a chronic stress response. So it's imperative to begin to restore that range of motion. It's what you do in your office. It's what I do in my office. One of the greatest keys in stopping that stress response and restoring homeostasis is getting the motion back in that spine, in those vertebrae, so we can shut off that stress response.
Absolutely. You know, I want to make a point there. I think that's awesome. But most people, if you and I were to walk to Walmart and screen the first 100 people through the door and ask them what a chiropractor does, they would say back pain, arm pain, neck pain. Yeah. In reality, you know, I'd heard it said by someone before, that's like buying one of the new iPhones and using it only as a calculator.
Yeah.
Right? You're missing out on everything else that it has to offer. And chiropractic, that's why everyone on the planet should be under care of a chiropractor that understands posture and nerve flow. Because
absolutely. By the grace of God, we do see people right now from 48 states and 12 countries. We've had, I think, 60 come in with cancer in the last 4 months alone, PTSD, MS, Parkinson's, coming to a chiropractic office of all things, when most people, like you said, assume that chiropractors for back pain and neck pain. But the reality is, when they lie on our table and we begin to free up that spinal cord, we help restore the body to homeostasis and rest. Like we talked about last time, at homeostasis, your body is the most resilient. Your body detoxifies itself most effectively. The immune system is the strongest. The digestive system is the strongest at homeostasis. But when the body goes into a stress response, it leaves homeostasis and you become more susceptible. And so if an individual comes in with bad posture, range of motion not where they're supposed to be, disc degeneration and arthritis, what it tells us, scientifically and physiologically speaking, their body's been stuck in a stress response, which means their body's more susceptible. And what we said last time is that we assume in America, unfortunately, that germs make you sick. But the reality is, if that was the case, we'd all be dead. The truth of the matter is, germs make a weak host sick, a body that's not resilient. And if we can get that spinal cord relaxed, get that motion back in that spinal cord, we're going to create resilience. And when they get off your table, Dr. John, when they get off my table, they are more resilient than when they lied on the table initially. And that's what we're doing. We're allowing you to go face this world as resilient as possible so you can live a happy and healthy life.
Absolutely. Some of the healthiest people on the planet are those under regular chiropractic care. Absolutely. Let's shift gears for a second. So we've talked a little bit about posture. We've talked about X-ray and looking at loss of motion in the spine and how that can create stress. Let's talk a little bit about chemical stress. What tools do you guys utilize in your office when you're starting to evaluate chemical stress?
You know, the thing is, Dr. John, there's a lot of different testing that you can do, from saliva testing that's going to measure stress hormones like cortisol and so forth. There's different tests that you can do. But for me, I think one of the greatest ways to assess chemical stress is when I have one of my patients fill out a food diary. I basically want to know what you're consuming, what you're eating over the last week's time. Are you eating gluten? Are you eating dairy? You know, are you consuming sugar and tons of sugar or processed foods? Because those are chemical stresses. And so we can really assess a person's and the chemical stress in their life really because of their diet. And if we just begin to make simple tweaks and removing some of those stressful chemicals, the sugars, the glutens, the dairies, and begin to incorporate some anti-inflammatory foods and detoxifying foods and foods rich in antioxidants and glutathione and so forth, we will begin to actually switch that system around and allow the body to begin to overcome the effects of chemical stress. But like you know, there's a lot of ways we can test stress, but a food diary for me is one of the greatest indications and really windows into a person and the chemical stress they're under on a regular basis.
Brings us to a great point. You can't manage it if you can't measure it.
Absolutely.
Right? So when you give them that 7-day food journal, we've seen in our office several times, it amazes me when they give it back, they say, now this wasn't a normal week, right? We always underestimate the bad things that we're eating, and we always overestimate the good things that we're doing. And I always tell people when we do the 7-day food journal, I not only want to see what you're eating, I want to see what you might be missing in your diet.
Absolutely.
Things that contain glutathione and you know, the B vitamins for that liver, phase 1 and phase 2 liver detoxification. And if we're not consuming them, that's okay. We'll talk to you about how do I supplement those, because some people simply won't eat those foods. You know, I tell them how successful will we really be in drastically changing your diet in a week or two? Probably as successful as I'd be in changing my own, right? So that's where supplements come in. And again, I think you really hit that point there. It's about getting on the right path. It's not about perfection. It's about progression. Are we headed in the right direction?
Yeah, you know, Doc, I tell patients that come to me, I said, you know, I'd rather find you on death's door. They brought in hospice and get you moving in the right direction than for you to assume you're healthy because you feel good. That's moving in the wrong direction. People feel good and have heart attacks, feel good and have cancer. Health is not based on how you feel. Health is based on resiliency. How resilient is my body's ability to adapt to and recover to the stressors of life? And you're so right. Hey, as long as we can begin to understand the true culprit in sickness and disease, we can begin to put the ship in the right direction. And then we're just going to add a few things. I'm big into, hey, there's grace for you on this journey. You don't have to jump all in because typically that's not sustainable. But let's begin to make some simple changes. Let's begin to add a few things. Don't even worry about taking away things. Let's add some things. Let's create resiliency. Let's allow the body to begin to detoxify itself. And then because of our food supply is so depleted of micronutrients and minerals and everything else, you know, in many cases, supplements are a great way to get those nutrients and get you on the road to a happy and healthy life.
Absolutely. You know, we tell folks all the time, we can't out-supplement a bad diet. Yeah. So it starts with making healthier choices in what you're putting into your mouth, and you really have to look at it. Every act of you taking a bite of food is either an act of assisted suicide or an act of nourishment, one or the other. And so we try to inspire people and empower them to make the best choice you can, make the best decision you can right at that moment in the situation that you're in. And it starts you on that journey or path. You said something one time, I remember you saying, I'd rather, tell me your statement about Skittles again. You always say.
But, you know, we created a company called Unhealthy Anonymous to be kind of a support system for people to get on the road to health, like Alcoholics Anonymous, where you can come as an alcoholic. We like to say, you know, Skittles in your mouth, Twizzlers in your pocket. I don't care. Let's just get you moving in the right direction. There's grace for you. There's great grace for you. And we just want you to know that, hey, you can be encouraged and you can have the hope that tomorrow you can be more resilient and healthy than you are today. It is a journey, okay? But let's get you moving in the right direction. And let's not be ignorant to the fact that we're the active participants in our own health journey and the success of our lives. Many people, we like to think that we're victims. We like to blame others. We like to blame doctors for where we find ourselves. But the reality is genetic expression and true health, we are the active participants. And the choices that we make will either turn the genetic expression on favorably or unfavorably based on those choices. So let's begin to tweak those choices. Look at health from the right perspective. Understand that, yes, stress is inevitable, and there's simple things that you can do to create resiliency to it and get on the road to a happy and healthy life.
Absolutely, Dr. Pete. That's what it's about, making better choices. It's not bad genes, bad luck, bad karma. It's bad choices that we're making as a society.
Yeah, you know, proverb that says, or it's in the Word of God, it just says, do not be deceived, I'm not mocked. Whatever man sows, he shall reap. There's seed, time, and harvest. And seeds that we're sowing even years ago, there's a time that goes by and we reap a harvest, whether favorably or unfavorably. And I think, like we're reaping a negative harvest in many different capacities in our life right now when it comes to health because of genetically modified foods, okay, because of sugar, because of a lot of these things, because of the standard American diet where we've been deceived. And the American public has been deceived because of that dollar. And so let's begin to turn that ship around now and look at health from the right perspective so that we can reap the benefits of those choices later on in life.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about emotional stress, because when you mention the word stress, that's where most people's mind go to. They say, well, I'm not in a stressful situation. I have a stressful job or a stressful relationship. What type of things can we look at, or what do you guys use in your office when you're looking at emotional stresses with a person?
There's a lot of ways that you can assess those objectively as well as subjectively. When it comes to emotional stress as well, even a perceived stress affects the amygdala or the emotional centers of your brain. And it might not even be the physical stress or the chemical stress, but it can be the emotional trigger that will actually activate the amygdala and put your body in a full-blown stress response. And so it's imperative that we begin to look at life from the right perspective. But I think, irregardless of the subjective and objective tests, I think there's, for me, there's a litmus test when it comes to emotional stress. And the litmus test is, does a person have joy and peace, and do they live in what's called rest? And what do I mean by that? Well, the Word of God says that may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace when you trust Him, when you see your life and your future in a positive light. Science will actually prove now that negative thought patterns put your body in a stress response, and anytime you see your future in a negative light, it actually stimulates and puts your body in a negative stress response. But positive thoughts will actually restore homeostasis and rest. I'm reminded of the Word of God in Hebrews where it said there's a rest for the people of God. When they live by faith. And what's living by faith? Faith is a perspective of how I see life based on truth, okay? Based on really our value and our worth as children of God, seeing ourselves according to the way God sees us. And when we see from His perspective, that's where truth becomes a conviction of our heart, and it brings rest. And anytime I move away from that, and when I look at life from the wrong perspective, when I have a mindset contrary to truth, it takes me from that place of rest. And I carry that yoke and those burdens. I lose my joy and my peace. And so really it comes down to, how can I help an individual, a patient of mine, begin to look at life from the right perspective, begin to see their worth and value, their created value, that they were created in the image and likeness of God, no matter who you are. God looks at you and you're precious in His sight. So precious that you are worth the blood of His only Son. And we all have that price tag on our life. Value, worth, destiny, potential, and legacy, which is awesome.
Amen. I agree with that 100%. And oftentimes we get caught in those strong emotional feelings that we have. And you mentioned something there about the brain. I think we should really point that out to our listeners, that it doesn't have to be an active stress that's going on. It can be a perceived stress. The brain doesn't know the difference. Yeah. In other words, you could have been involved in a situation where, let's say you were at a ball game and something stressful happened in that particular stadium. Well, you could go back to visit that stadium, sit in the same seats, and although that event's not going on, it can stir those same emotions again. And so we can trigger that same thing over and over again.
Absolutely, and the body forms what's called a neuroplastic pattern that becomes sensitized. It's like an individual that goes to war, he's on the front lines of war, and the amygdala of your brain takes a mental picture. It's like being at a zoo and a tiger got out. Well, guess what? Your amygdala takes a picture, says, never go back there again. Why? Because it's danger. Even if it's not a real danger, it can be perceived as such, and it will affect that amygdala, put your body into a stress response. So a lot of these individuals with PTSD are coming back. They've been at the throes of war and putting their life on the line. And what happens is their body goes into a stress response. And because they don't have enough counterbalances, the body never gets back to homeostasis and rest. And any trigger here in America, far removed from that stressful situation around the world, far removed from their life being threatened anymore, their brain still assumes that they're in a stress response. It becomes sensitized. And a lot of times, too, Dr. John, when we have mindsets contrary to truth, regardless of how we got that mindset, whether it's from abuse or trauma or relationships or family line, when we have mindsets, we create what's called strongholds. And a stronghold is literally a fortified structure that we create. It's like a castle that actually protects us and protects these negative mindsets. That's why you have to bind those strongholds. You have to tear down those strongholds. You have to hold every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. And what does that mean? Of your value and your worth as a child of God. Because if not, we create these strongholds in our life that allow us to stay in these negative, stressful patterns that will literally destroy you and your health.
Amazing. You know, one of the things we always say with clients in a consultation is question one, do you feel you can get better?
Yeah.
Right? And number two, do you feel you deserve to get better? And we talk about that and being a child of God and you know, living your life to its full potential, and the fact that Christ died for all these things. I tell people all the time, he didn't say I died for all these things except diabetes. I died for all these things except, you know, stress or depression or anxiety. And in reality, the innate power, the healing power of the body, the one that's on the job 24/7 that runs your body, is the greatest doctor in the room. I tell them that all the time. And it's just providing the body with what it needs and removing the stressful patterns that occur or happen with that. So,
because as you know, stress is inevitable. It's going to face us every day of our life. You can't eliminate it. You can minimize it, absolutely, but you can't eliminate it. And so stress is more, health is more about creating resiliency to it, having counterbalances in place, making sure you have good relationships, making sure that you have people sowing into your life, speaking truth in your life, and two, allowing people and encouraging people in their journey that, hey, you are loved by the living God. You are of great value and worth. And unless I begin to understand the love that my Father has for me, we lose perspective, and it's hard to sustain the journey effectively and successfully if I don't know that I'm loved by my Father.
Absolutely. That's awesome stuff, buddy. I appreciate that. It's amazing how it always takes the turn right back to where it should be in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Which is glorifying God up above. So, you know, one of the things we're mentioning, physical stress, chemical stress, emotional stress, we have some very good tools. And I'm just going to share a screen real quick. We have a stress survey that if our listeners would like it, in the comment section there, we'll put in info@Bodyworks Wellness. And if you'll just shoot us an email and say, hey, I would like to see this stress form that you're talking about. Let me show you quickly what it looks like there. We'd be happy to send you a copy of it and allow you to kind of go through and evaluate some of those stressful. How stressed is your day? You know, I feel wore down or burnt out, and maybe not at all or somewhat or very much. And it talks a little bit about your sleep and your consumption of foods, and then it kind of gives us a rating on the bottom so that we kind of know how to move forward or what to do with it. So be happy to send that out as a free tool for those of you that are interested in how can I learn a little bit more about my stress? How can I find out if stress is really the underlying culprit that's leading to a lot of my potential problems or disease problems? So make sure you look in the comment section, shoot us an email there at info@Bodyworks Wellness, and we'll be happy to send that out to you. So let's talk a little bit. We've talked now about the tools and techniques that we can use to analyze stress. And one of the things that we want to focus back on again is in the month of November here. Again, we've partnered with you guys in Stress RX. We're doing a special, a 15% bundle because we're so encouraged about the product of Stress RX. And you mentioned early, sometimes it's not even changing things right off the bat. It's just adding something, and then we'll start taking away. So it's a great way for people to start to experience what an herbal adaptogen can do and how it can help those adrenal systems. So just kind of refresh for Stress RX, the ashwagandha, rhodiola, and cordyceps, and how those adaptogens work, if you would.
You know, Dr. John, we created Stress RX initially because of the patients that came to us from around the world, understanding that health is based on my body's ability to adapt to the environment physiologically and then recover all the way from it. We mentioned last time, you know, there's a book called Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, and zebras are one species that their body's always on the run. They're always running away from a tiger or lion, but when they get away from that lion or tiger, within 30 seconds, their body restores itself to homeostasis, and it's the essence of health. But so many of us, we deal with stress on a regular basis. You know, maybe it's that 32-ounce soft drink that puts your body into a full-blown stress response within 30 minutes, and it takes 4 hours to get back to homeostasis. But many individuals dealing with PTSD, heart disease, cancer, infertility, autoimmune issues, their body adapts physiologically, but never makes it all the way back to homeostasis and rest. And that's what's called HPA axis dysfunction. And really the top 50 diseases on the planet right now are rooted back into HPA axis dysfunction. And so there's only 3 ways to restore HPA axis dysfunction if the body leaves homeostasis and isn't able to return. Number 1 is your thought process. Like we said, negative thoughts put you into a stress response, positive thoughts bring it back. Number 2 is what's called proprioception or movement. That's what we do in our office. We restore that movement to that spine that restores homeostasis. But the only other way proven by science right now to restore homeostasis once the body is left and not able to recover are what are called adaptogenic herbs. And adaptogens act like a thermostat in the brain. There's proven scientifically to affect this HPA axis and restore homeostasis and rest. And so while a lot of supplements and products and medications go one way or the other, like caffeine's a stimulant and then there's suppressants, adaptogens do both. They act at that thermostat, restoring balance. And we created a product called Stress RX to help our patients get that body to homeostasis and rest. We incorporated rhodiola, ashwagandha, and cordyceps because of the synergistic effect proven in the literature to boost the immune system, to help the body detoxify itself, to increase the sensitivity of the neurotransmitters dopamine and serotonin that increases your focus, memory, concentration, and mood. It restores sleep cycles, and Stress RX does that. It makes sure your body's always getting back to homeostasis and rest, and the longer you take it, science will actually prove it speeds up that process. You become like that zebra that even if you're always on the run, okay, when you get away from that stressful situation, within a very short period of time, the body's at homeostasis, restores really the resilience that the body needs to live a happy and healthy life. And we're very, very excited about it simply because we don't believe there's anything like it on the planet that restores homeostasis as effectively as Stress RX.
Yeah. Not only is it a simple and effective solution, it's an easy solution to begin to use in your life. And that's important. Yeah. You mentioned a few things there. You talked a little bit about the lion and you talked about the zebra, and I think of the zebra or the gazelle. And quite honestly, all of us, when we wake up in the morning, we're either a lion or we're a gazelle. We're either running towards something, right? If we understand the power that we're serving a living, loving God that's ever powerful, or we're running away from something. Constantly. So either way, when we wake up in the morning, we both run, but we're either running towards something or running away from something.
Yeah. What's unique is that the adaptogens work because in the morning, for instance, I'll take them up, whether you feel groggy or you feel tired or whether you have all this, it restores that homeostasis. And so in the morning, it's going to get you up to homeostasis, increase your focus, concentration, memory, and mood. And then as the day goes on, you kind of move past that. And so I take 2 in the morning to get me to homeostasis. And then as the day goes on, when I leave the office every evening, I take 2 more that brings me back down to homeostasis so I can enjoy my family in the evening. When I was traveling to Nigeria here last week, I took 8 a day. Why? Because and I didn't have any jet lag, which was amazing. I got back Tuesday evening into Knoxville. Wednesday morning, I was seeing patients, and I saw patients all Wednesday and all Thursday with no jet lag. But I was taking these because it was increasing resiliency so that I could get on the road to a happy and healthy life.
Absolutely. It's about balance. It's about bringing you back to balance. Yeah, it's not the upper or the downer. It's about living life in balance, and that's for sure. Well, wrapping up, we talked about a couple things there. You talked about the fact that you need to make choices in the way you move, better choices in the way you move, better choices in the way we eat, the things that we're putting into our body, and make sure that we're nourishing our body and staying away from toxins. And then change our thinking a little bit to realize that we're not going to be able to eliminate stress totally, but we can increase our resilience and balance and bring our bodies back to homeostasis. So.
Absolutely. Just simple things that we can all incorporate today and see quick and very beneficial benefits to those choices that we make. And John, I like to tell people that choices I make in alignment with the vision from my life will always propel that vision forward. But if I'm making choices contrary to the vision for my life, I take myself off course. It's like I want to lose weight, but I'm making choices that are increasing calorie consumption, eating things, being under more stress. Well, those are choices contrary to the vision to have a healthy weight. And so let's make sure that we're moving in the right direction, making sure our perspective's right, and we all will actually really run this race to win and do it very, very well.
Awesome. Well, listen, Dr. Pete, great information. I truly appreciate it, and so happy that we can continue to feed our tribe with this awesome information. In a couple weeks, we'll sit down again and we'll talk about the top tips that you recommend and that I recommend as we're dealing with the holiday season. There's some inherent stress there. So what are some of the top tips that we can do to help people out? So in a couple weeks, I look forward to sitting back down with you again and speaking about some of that stuff. We love you and we appreciate you. We thank you for all you're doing out there, buddy, and I can't wait to sit down with you next time.
Absolutely. Doc, it's an honor to speak with you as well. Always. I love you and your family, and you have an awesome day.
Excellent. Catch you next time.
Bless you guys.